Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of April. So overall, I had a pretty good reading month in April. I completed 8 books. I read a grand total of about 3,200 pages. As far as genres go, I read 2 high fantasy, 4 urban fantasy, 1 sci-fi, and 1 nonfiction. So I think today I'm going to get the negatives out of the way first and start with the book that I liked the least and then work my way up to the book that I liked the most so we can end on a high, happy note. All right, so the book that I read this month that I liked the least, very unfortunately, was Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. This book had a lot going for it. It is about magicians in New York City. There are a number of magical houses or like families, and this book is about this, I guess it's kind of like a contest that happens periodically where they all compete with each other and power can be shifted between those families depending on how those competitions kind of pan out. I think that it was a really cool idea, and I really like how the book opened. There was a very vivid scene where there's a magician who does some like really cool magic, but unfortunately it kind of went a little downhill for me. The main issue that I had with this book was that the characters felt, well, 2 main issues really. The characters felt pretty hollow to me. Even the main character, I never really connected with the main character. The other major issue that I had with this book is that the resolution of various conflicts and climaxes would happen within a matter of like a couple paragraphs. There would be like a bad guy that would be sort of played up for like many chapters, and then whenever there was like a face-off, that it would just be over in like literally like 1 or 2 paragraphs. At the very least, like dedicate 1 chapter to something like that. Also, for this having the word magicians in the title, there was actually very little magic. It was a missed opportunity. I expected to see a lot of magic in this book, rightfully so, and I just didn't. So for all of those reasons, I gave Unkindness of Magicians 2.5 stars. Alrighty, the second book up the ladder is also very unfortunately Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. This really hurts my soul that I didn't love this book as much as I wanted to. This is the second book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I'm sure most of you watching this are probably already familiar with the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but for the sake of time, if you aren't, I will put a link down below in the video description so you can go and read the synopsis if you're interested in finding out more. So this book, I really liked the way it picked up from the last book, where the last book left off. It was off to a great start. It also introduced a few new characters that I really liked. But I think nothing really happened in it. It felt a lot like the characters were just kind of, I don't know, just going from one place to another. This book also relied really heavily on miscommunication as a plot device, or not even so much miscommunication, but characters not willing to like talk to each other, which really bothers me. I don't know, I really don't like that as a plot device. I'm already starting to forget what this was even about. Like, it had such a small impact on me. So little happened that it didn't even stick in my mind. What I really don't get about it is that this book is actually longer than Shadow and Bone and less happens in it. 1/3 of it at least could have been taken out and it would have had a better impact than it did for me. So I mean, I'm talking about it. I'm talking down at it pretty hard. I think mostly just because I was disappointed in it from how much I liked the first book. Honestly, this book, it was okay. It was aggressively okay. And because of that, I gave this book 3 stars. The next book on the list is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. This is a weird book. This is about a group of people who have been raised together, and they were raised in this home that has a library, the Library of Mount Char, and they were raised by a man who they all call Father. They all have some unique abilities. You know, this is a fantasy. This is an urban fantasy. So some of their abilities are pretty kind of magical, supernatural. Anyhow, when this book opens, we know that Father has gone missing and they're all searching for him. It didn't really make sense. The first quarter to a third of it, I was just like, I'm not following this at all. Then the middle part, I got on board with it and was like, this is amazing. I love this book. This may be my new favorite book, particularly one scene, this won't spoil it, but if you've read it, the scene with all the dogs, I was so into that. And then it got to the end and it was kind of an ending that I wasn't wild about. It was an ending that was trying sort of a little too hard to wrap everything up. I like books to kind of be left a little bit more open. I gave this book 3 stars. I feel like the 4+ stars that it has on Goodreads are definitely earned. It's a quality book and I can see why people love it, but I only give 4 and 5 stars to books that really mean something to me, and this just didn't. But take that with a grain of salt, because it is a good book, objectively so. It's seeing someone who's attractive and just not personally being attracted to them. I can see that this is a good book. I'm just not, it's me, not the book. I'm just not that into it. So yeah, it's a little low on my list, but still, if that description sounds remotely interesting to you, I definitely recommend that you pick up The Library at Mount Char. The next book that I enjoyed up the line is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. This is actually the nonfiction book that I mentioned. I did not rate this book. I did not give this a star rating, but as far as the order that I enjoyed all these books in, this is about where I would put it. This book is more or less, I think I put this in my Goodreads review, but it's kind of a manual on how to not be an asshole on the internet. This book is, he found a bunch of cases of people, real life cases where people had said something or done something absent-mindedly and really screwed up, and then everyone came for them. This book is really mostly him sort of reporting on these various cases of people who have been severely publicly shamed, kind of following up from these events and what the major repercussions that happened in these people's lives. A lot of these people's lives have been destroyed. A lot of these people had to go into hiding. A lot of these people had been seriously harassed. So this book, it just really, and I've never participated in publicly shaming anyone on the internet. I would never want to do that. Don't do that. But still, it even made me feel guilty, and I've never even done it. It made me feel really bad for the people that have experienced this. So Jon Ronson is a good writer. He's clever and he has a way with words and he's funny. So yeah, I would, if you are interested in that sort of description at all, I would definitely recommend this book. So the next book up is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is a story about 2 young men who are college students. They are college roommates. I believe they are pre-med, and they get an assignment. I don't know if it's their thesis or something like that. They study near-death experiences and end up having a falling out over this information, and the rest of the book is about their rivalry. Neither one of them is really 100% good or bad. But they're both leaning a little bit more to the bad side. I'm not gonna lie. I absolutely loved this concept, like not a good guy versus a bad guy, but like kind of two bad guys, two rivals, like trying to get revenge on each other. It goes back and forth between the past and the present. And the present sections are kind of a countdown, a 24-hour countdown. The past, of course, is, what led them up to this sort of rivalry. But the present is a 24-hour countdown, and it really builds a lot of tension. And it's really cool, really fun, really interesting. I actually really, really liked this book, aside from two things that were major, major problems, in my opinion. One of them was a huge plot hole, and one of them was a huge plot convenience. Nonetheless, I did really enjoy this book. I will probably continue with the series. I'm just going to have to try to keep the plot convenience and the plot hole at the back of my mind as best as I can. But yeah, I did like this book, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. The next book up the list is The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. This is a science fiction novel. I don't want to say too much about it, and I also recommend that you do not read the synopsis on Goodreads, because it has a couple pretty big spoilers in it, like things that don't happen in this book until like the very, very end. So it's not a good synopsis. Like, I would really recommend you steer clear of that. What I will say about this is that it has to do with like reaching out into the galaxy, trying to like find other intelligent life forms. There's a lot of intrigue in this book, and it probably takes a good 2/3 of it, I'd say, to really kind of get a really good picture of what's going on in the story. So if you decide to read this and you feel a little confused for a while, like, that is intentionally so. Also, this book has a lot of technical writing in it. It's like very scientific, like astrophysics and radio signals, and like sort of the science behind that. So it gets very technical. In fact, a lot of this kind of went over my head. It was a little bit of an issue for me, because I'm the kind of person who, like, if I'm learning about something or reading something, like, if I don't understand every last word, then I feel like I don't understand anything. I don't know if any of you are like that, please tell me down below. I know that probably sounds a little neurotic, but now you know that about me. We're getting to know each other, so that's part of who I am. I can be a pretty slow reader if a book has a lot of technical information, because if there's something I don't get, I will sit there and read it over and over and over again until I grasp it. This book is so technical, and I don't have training in astrophysics, so there are things in here that I'm just never going to understand, no matter how many times I read through it. So it was a little challenging for me to just be like, I don't get that, and that's okay. Like, it's okay. You don't have to understand all of the technical information in this book to understand the book and as a whole and enjoy it. The characters in this book were also a little underdeveloped for me, though, this is the first in a series, so I feel like that is forgivable to a certain degree. We'll see, like, as the series progresses, if it continues to be that way, that will be a very serious problem. But I can forgive that a little bit. Overall, though, I really enjoyed this book. I thought the concept was just stellar. So cool. I love science fiction. I just love what this book did. The overall subject matter of this, as far as this type of thing being approached in science fiction in general, it's not generally approached the way that this book does it. So I thought that sounds vague. If you want to talk to me more about what that means in the comments below, I'll talk to you. I just don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read the book. But yeah, I'm excited to continue with this series. I gave this book 3.5 stars because, how I felt about the characters and how I felt a little overwhelmed with the technical explanations. However, on Goodreads, I rounded it up to 4 stars. This was a very good book, and if you like sci-fi, hard sci-fi, I highly recommend that you pick up The Three-Body Problem. My second favorite book that I read this month was The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is about New York City. It's kind of, I thought it was going to be about New York City being like sentient, but it's not. It's more like it's personified. I'm not going to be able to describe this well. You'll have to read the book to know what I'm talking about. But there are 5 individuals that represent the city: Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island, and who am I missing? Queens, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. Anyhow, this is an urban fantasy. There is sort of this force that's trying to take over the city, and these 5 individuals are trying to save it. I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want to spoil it. But this was a really fun book. This tackles some pretty heavy themes that include both racism and gentrification. So though this book almost had like a superhero feel to it, it definitely touched on some deeper, more important topics. These are very timely conversations to have about racism and gentrification. There is a lot to say about that. I really loved that was what Jemisin was going for with this book. I really appreciated that. And it made this book feel extremely meaningful, but at times, kind of the way that she sort of pushed those themes began to feel kind of repetitive and spoon-fed. That being said, N.K. Jemisin, her writing style is absolutely beautiful. She has this way with words where her prose feel very, I'm not going to say purple or flowery or anything like that, but they have this really, she has this lyrical way in the way that she writes, and it's just exquisite. But at the same time, it is very straightforward and very accessible. I don't know, I've never read from an author that could strike that balance so well. I was absolutely amazed by how she wrote this book. This is, I believe, the first in a series, which I didn't realize until I got to the end of the book, and I was like, this has to be a series. I feel like a dum-dum, but yes, I looked it up, and this is the first in the series. I gave this book 4 stars, rightfully so. This is a very good book. If you just love New York City, you may love this book. If you enjoy books that kind of speak to the themes of racism and gentrification, and I would say almost even kind of a found family, you may really like this book. And also books that have sort of kind of an urban fantasy, like they're not superheroes, but kind of that quality about it, then I definitely recommend you pick up The City We Became. So we have made it to my favorite book that I read in the month of April, Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This book, I read it pretty early on in the month, but I am still basking in the afterglow. This book was amazing. This book was so good. This is probably going to be one of my favorite books that I read this year. This is a high fantasy book. It is a story about a community or a world where magic is like industrialized. And what I mean by that is that kind of everything or most everything is held together by magic. Things can be enchanted. Objects can be enchanted to believe that they are something else. Like, wood can be stronger because it can be enchanted to believe that it is stone. The story follows a young woman who is a sort of a hired thief. She takes on these jobs to, do various, thieving, and the book opens with her being, she is on this job. She's going to steal some object, and she steals this object, and come to find out that this object is a very powerful object. And the book is more or less about her kind of being chased by someone who wants this object, and her trying to, keep ahead of that. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but I would call this book, it is very cat and mouse, and it also has a really cool heist in it. This book, I really, really, really love the way that Robert Jackson Bennett writes. It reminds me a lot of the way Brandon Sanderson writes, who I love. I don't know if you have read any of his stuff. Would you agree with me that there's sort of like a similarity in their writing style? This book, it had a lot of really interesting political intrigue in it, and the characters were they were so well developed, so well fleshed out. The main character, this young woman who is the thief, I feel like she was really an interesting character, and she had the potential to almost have like that kind of manic pixie dream girl quality to her, but she didn't, which I really appreciated. But she is, she's really, really cool girl with a lot of really cool skills. One reason that I think that this book might remind me a little bit of Brandon Sanderson is because much like Warbreaker, this book also has a sentient object in it. But I feel like the object in this book, as opposed to Warbreaker, was executed extremely well with just a lot of finesse. It was still, I'm still getting used to the idea of talking objects, but I feel like this definitely came a whole lot closer to hitting the mark as far as something that I could really, really get behind. This book, it was nearly perfect to me. This was actually a 4.5-star book. The reason I deducted that half star is that this book was pretty info dumpy. And this one is also the first in a series. So I feel like that to a certain degree it's definitely forgivable, like whenever you're world building and stuff like that. But it wasn't just like one or two instances, like it just like throughout the book continued just to info dump. And so that could be a little bit distracting. But setting that aside, this book, this was wonderful. This was absolutely wonderful. I highly recommend it if you have not read this book. If you like high fantasy and heist novels, you may really love this book, especially, if you want to read that type of book with a female protagonist. Definitely recommend Foundryside. So I think that that's going to be it for me today. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of April. I would love to hear from you down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, or if you read any books in April that you loved. I am always looking for my next great book recommendation. If you did enjoy this video, I really hope that you will give it a thumbs up and possibly subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.